In this program, I'm going to demonstrate some of the if statement structures. And to do that, I have made three variables. So I have three integers, first num, second num, and third num. And I've given them initial values of 2, 5, and 7. And what I'm going to do is print out different statements depending on the values of those numbers. Of course, the values of those numbers aren't changing because I've hard-coded them into the code here as opposed to asking the user to enter them. But we will still be able to demonstrate the concept of if structures. So an if statement is asking a question, and that question is called the condition. If the condition is true, the if statement is going to run whatever is between the brackets. So in this case, my condition is first num equal to 2. And you notice if I'm setting first num equal to 2, I use one equal sign. If I'm asking if first num is equal to 2, I use a double equal sign. Okay, that's really important. If you make a mistake here and use a single equal sign, this loop will always run, and you'll get very confused as to why that is happening, even if first num is not 2 when you start. So make sure if you're asking the question, is first num equal to 2, you are using a double equal sign. Okay, so if first num is equal to 2, I want to just see out a statement that says first, let's put that in quotes, first num is equal to 2. So this is just a plain statement, maybe with an end line, a couple of end lines at the end. Okay, and let's make sure I have my system pause. Yes, I do. Okay, so now when I run this, I should see the statement first num is equal to 2. And I do. I get the statement first num is equal to 2 because of course it is. So this condition evaluates as true, and then whatever is between these two brackets is what gets executed. If first num was not equal to 2, so if I change that to a 1, this condition will no longer be true, and this statement will not be printed out, which means for this program nothing should be printed out, except for the system pause line telling us to press. So as you can see now, the statement didn't print out. So because first num wasn't 2, it just did nothing. And note that we could avoid using these brackets if we only have one statement that we want to execute. We could just write it like this. I never do that because chances are I'm going to go back and add a second line because I'm going to think of something that I'm going to want to do in that case, and I'm going to forget to add the brackets back in. So I always put these brackets in, even if I only have one statement, even though it makes my code bigger. Okay, so if we wanted to do something else, if first num wasn't equal to 2, we could do that by adding an else condition to our if statement. So this is now one big structure, an if else. If first num is true, it's going to do this. If it's not true, it's going to jump down here and do whatever I write here. So I'm going to have it say first num is not equal to 2. And I'll put an end line. And I'll put one down here so that I know I always get one before my system pause. Okay, so let's run that. And now we can see it says first num is not equal to 2, and that's true because first num is actually equal to 1. If I change first num back to 2, it should run the first part that says first num is equal to 2. And yes, indeed, first num is equal to 2. Okay, so we've seen the if statement and the if-else statement. What if there's more conditions we want to look at, not just is it equal to 2 or not equal to 2? In those cases, we can use an if-else-if statement. So let me change this. I'm going to say if first num is greater than or equal to 5. So now I'm using a relational operator, greater than equal to 5. And I always remember that the equal sign comes after the greater than sign because you type it like you say it. So you say greater than or equal to, greater than equal to. Okay? So if that is true, I'm going to say first num is greater than or equal to 5. Then I'm going to add another condition. So I'm going to change this else into an else if. An else if has a condition. Notice before that the else didn't have a condition because it's just if nothing else is true, do that. But an else if evaluates a new condition. So let's ask if second num is greater than or equal to 5. And if that is true, I'm going to say that second num is greater than or equal to 5, and I have to be very certain to change these words. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and add a second else if. And I can add actually as many else ifs as I want to, as long as they're after the if and before the else. So I'm going to ask if third num is greater than or equal to 5. If that is true, I'm going to say third num is greater than or equal to 5. And notice that I always put the starting bracket in when I put the opening and closing brackets in at the same time so that I don't forget to put this bracket. Okay, and I can have an else condition here, which means if none of these things are true, I'm going to say no numbers are greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so let's see what happens when we run this. First num is 2, second num is 5, third num is 7. Then we're going to ask if first num is greater than or equal to 5, or if second num is greater than or equal to 5, or if third num is greater than or equal to 5. and let's see what the result is. Okay, so you notice that even though two of the numbers were greater than or equal to 5, it only printed out one statement saying second num is greater than or equal to 5. And that's because for an if-else-if construction, the first true condition that it comes across is what it's going to do, and then it's going to jump to the end. So it looks at this part of the loop and says, okay, is that condition true? No, so I'm going to skip this part. Then it says, is this condition true? Yes, so it's going to run this part, and then it's going to jump down here to the end. Okay, so it doesn't even look at these two because it found a true condition and it says fine, that's true. It skips everything else and goes to the end. If you wanted to check each number individually, you could use 3 separate if statements, and then I wouldn't have this. So if I wanted more than one statement to print out, if more than one number was greater than or equal to 5, I would need 3 separate if statements. So it will look at this condition. If it's true, it will do this. If not, it'll jump, or in any case, even if it is true, it's going to look at this condition. Then it's going to look at this condition. So these are 3 separate if statements. Let me put a space in between them so just so we can see them. So it's going to run this. If it's true, it's going to print out this statement. If it's not, it'll do nothing. Then it will run this. If it's true, print out this statement. If not, do nothing. Then it will run this. So these are 3 separate ifs. So now if I run this, I can see that 2 statements actually get printed out. Third num is greater than or equal to 5, and second num is greater than or equal to 5, because both of these if statements will evaluate as true. Okay, so that's a difference between putting multiple if statements and using an if-else-if construction. The last thing I want to show you is the nested if statement. So let me delete this if statement. A nested if statement is when you put one if statement inside of another if statement. So I have my statement that says if second num is greater than 5, do whatever's in these brackets. I'm going to put this if statement inside these brackets. And I'm going to move my brackets over just to show that this if statement is inside this if statement. Okay, so let's see. If third num is greater than or equal to 5, I want it to say third num is greater than or equal to 5. If it's not, I want it to say let's see. Second num is greater than or equal to 5, but third num is not. Okay, and this part of the if statement will only get executed, like this whole if statement will only get executed if it's true that second num is greater than or equal to 5. So in that case, we know if third num is also greater than or equal to 5, we know that they're both greater than or equal to 5. So I could say third num and second num, because if second num is not greater than or equal to 5, it won't even get here. Okay? So okay, so let's run this. Okay, so we can see that both second and third num are greater than or equal to 5, and our program says third num and second num are greater than or equal to 5. If I change third num to be less than 5, the else condition should run that says second num is greater than or equal to 5, but third num is not. And you can see that it does. Okay, that's because this part of the if statement wasn't true, so it went to the else and executed this. Okay, so let's take a closer look at why brackets become really important. Right now I've got first num is 2, second num is 4, third num is 7. And I've got my first part of the if structure, and then I've got this else. So if second num is greater than or equal to 5, I'm going to go and check third num. But if second num is not equal to 5, I'm going to print out this statement that says second num is not greater than or equal to 5. And right now I've got second num equal to 4, which is true. So I'm expecting that this statement should print out. So let's see that. And it does. So you can see here it says second num is not greater than or equal to 5, which is true. So it evaluated this condition, realized it was not true, jumped down to the else, and executed what was in the else. The important thing about the brackets in this case, even though we only have one statement in each if, and so the brackets aren't technically necessary, I'll show you what happens if I remove all the brackets. So the compiler is not going to complain because I'm allowed to not put those brackets. But let's see what happens when it runs. Notice now it didn't print out any statement. So if second num was greater than or equal to 5, we thought it should jump down here, or is not greater than or equal to 5, sorry. It should jump down here. However, this else doesn't actually go with this if anymore. By removing the brackets, the computer is automatically assuming that this else goes with this if. So it would only execute this else if third num was not greater than or equal to 5. But it is, so it just did nothing. So if you want to see that execute, if I make third num less than or equal to 5, it will execute this, because it's thinking that this is really part of that statement. If I tab it in like that, it's thinking these two go together, so that if third num is not greater than or equal to 5, it's going to do this. So watch, now it will do it. Else. Oh, but my mistake. In order to get that loop to run, I have to make second num greater than or equal to 5 because this has to be true before it will even look at this. So now it's saying second num is greater, it's printing out this line here, even though that's not true, because it's thinking this else really belongs with this, and since this is false, it's going to run this else. Okay, but remember, it doesn't even check these two unless this one is greater than or equal to 5. That's why I had to change that. So the bottom line there is, if you want to keep things straight so that you know exactly which else belongs with which if, put the brackets in. Okay? And then you'll never have any doubt. So now we can clearly see this if is inside these two brackets, so it's part of that. This else is afterwards, so it goes with this if. Okay? And I'm going to put that back to 4, and I'll see my, and I'll put that back to 7. And this time it should say this, because second num is not greater than or equal to 5. And it does. So my advice is always put the brackets in. Yes, it makes your code a little bit longer to look at, but it makes it a lot easier to read, and it's a lot clearer to you what the compiler is actually going to do with those statements. Let's look at one more case. If we wanted to have multiple conditions, so instead of writing what I have at the top here where it's check second num and then checks third num, I could actually check them both at the same time. I could do that by using a combination of our relational operators like greater than or equals to and the logical operator AND. So I'm going to cut this and I'm going to put the AND operator in between, and I'm going to place it here, but I also need a full set of brackets around the condition to say that all of that is the condition. So now you can see that the condition is if second num is greater than 5 and third num is greater than or equal to 5, that's greater than or equal to as well, it'll say third num and second num are greater than or equal to 5. So it's going to have the same effect as that nested if, but I've done it with just one if using the AND operator. So remember, these two brackets have to be there. Okay, so let me make second num also greater than 5, and we should see that statement execute. Okay, and it does. Now, if I make either one of them not greater than or equal to 5 anymore, it will not execute this statement. Okay, and as you can see, it just said nothing because this wasn't true anymore because this part wasn't true. So even though this is true, true and false equals false for the overall condition, So it skipped this and then just did nothing because we had nothing else in our program.